Hello, everybody. This is Sean Park from Amalgam Insights, and thank you for joining me today for our TEM Expo webinar number 9, Managing Service Orders, talking about timely enablement and retirement. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because as a practitioner, I've spent so many hours focusing on getting service orders right and then the subsequent documentation and processing needed to make these service orders valuable from a cost cutting and cost management perspective. I feel like this is a hidden area that is not discussed enough when we talk about technology expense management, and it's important because it also gets overlooked in how we evaluate the expense management and technology management solutions that we look at. So as we think about this topic today, first of all, I just want you to think about that service orders in terms of the big picture. First, I wanted to make sure you're invited to our TEM Expo as well, our Technology Expense Management Expo. It's going to be a virtual event focused on this topic and a whole lot more. We're going to be looking at spend areas across network, telecom, SaaS, and infrastructure as a service, as well as IT finance, with the goal of cutting costs and saving jobs. Our goal here is to help our attendees collectively save $1 billion in 2020. And if you look at the attachments tab on your presentation, you'll have a direct sign up to be able to get a free pass to this event as my thanks for your thank you for showing you up to this webinar. So thanks a lot for showing up. And also thank you so much to our premier sponsor for TEM Expo, Mobicord, who came on board early and has been sponsoring both the webinars and the virtual event we'll be holding on July 14th. Great. So, before I go on, I'm talking about cutting costs and saving jobs. It looks like we got some decent news from the Bureau of Labor Statistics last week, who announced that unemployment isn't growing as quickly as we had expected. This is actually really good news because it means that perhaps the bleeding is stopping and we can get back to hiring back all the people who have been either furloughed or losing their jobs. And frankly, that's kind of that's the goal of everything we've been talking about here. When we talk about IT cost cutting, for me, this means providing cash to the company to be able to use to do important things like bring people back on board. This is something that I remember happening both in the 2000 and 2008 recessions, where companies simply weren't sure of their cash position and had to make difficult decisions on talent as a result. I want to make sure that we, in our roles across IT finance, sourcing, and operations, are doing the right things to make sure that our company has our strongest cash management position possible. So from that perspective, we are managing COVID IT. We are at this stage of securing our business and auditing our environment. And I've been adding a number of frameworks associated with those across all these spend categories. If you haven't looked at webinars 1 through 6, please take a look at those are the background information for this webinar as well. And with that, let's get into this topic of service orders. So understanding procure to pay from an IT perspective, there's this kind of top row where you're trying to identify the actual purchase that needs to be made and then get permission to do it. This is getting tighter and more challenging as time goes by. If this recession is anything like the previous two, we're going to see finance continue to lock down on purchase approvals until I would expect anything that is more than 0.001% of company bookings basically requires some sort of C-level approval. So you can do that math of what that means for your particular organization. But basically, purchase approvals are going to continue to be tight for the rest of 2020. But I'm really focused today on this middle row, talking about creating the service order approval, and then service provisioning. And then later this week, I'll be going into this bottom section around service level agreements, invoice processing, and payment processing. But this middle part around service orders and requests, service approvals, and service provisioning, that part is important because from our perspective here at Amalgam Insights, we see that 2 to 5% of IT subscription spend every year gets lost or wasted based on the inability to track service orders correctly. And it's a big amount, and it's a hidden amount that can easily be ignored by companies that aren't doing a good job at managing service orders. And IT service orders are complicated because they require more than simply filling out a form and then getting your service at the end of the day. There's a technical aspect to understanding whether the order's been placed correctly with each carrier or each service provider, and then understanding what it means to have service order approval, and then actually handling both the physical and virtual aspects of service provisioning that are associated with each service order. So what makes these IT service orders different? From as I said, it takes this technical skill, and basically the framework we use to think about this here at Amalgam Insights is ABC: active, build, and compliant service orders. Basically, if you can get that ABC correct for your IT service order, you'll be okay. But it's a bit harder to do that than simply saying ABC. You have to have some technical understanding of what you're doing, especially in these IT subscription areas where I spend most of my time, across telecom, enterprise mobility, infrastructure as a service, and software as a service. Each of these 4 areas has its own specific definitions of what a service order is, as well as how to actually make sure that those service orders are an active service means tracking that service order to ensure that the functionality, billing plans, usage plans, and integration with all other functionalities are placed correctly. This can be pretty complicated when you're thinking about, for instance, a network service, which is combined with perhaps porting, perhaps security, perhaps network porting, network management, as well as other IT management applications where that network element needs to be tracked. That network element isn't going to be a standalone capability, but it's going to be connected with the rest of your wide area network. Similarly, you have that same type of issue with something like a cell phone, where the cell phone in and of itself it is one piece of the puzzle, but it probably requires its own rate plan. It requires probably some sort of device management or endpoint management capability. It requires its own apps that are going to make it useful, whether that's your ERP or CRM, mobile access, or simply email and collaboration tools. So make sure that all of these integrations are in place, all the billing plans are in place, and that the functionality itself is actually working. And of course, the functionality is easier to figure out from something like a cell phone, where you turn it on and off and it's going to work, or a SaaS application where you log in and you're able to start working. That's pretty straightforward, but with both network and infrastructure as a service, this can be more complicated, as both of these often require a combination of functionalities to be up and running for the service order to be completed. And it can be difficult to track down all of those functionalities if you're not aware of what that service order entails, or how that service order is deployed from a practical and technical perspective. So something to keep in mind there, that simply tracking a service order to make sure that actual functional activity is an important starting point for these IT service orders that get put into place. So we talk about an active service being functional, fully deployed, accounted in all relevant systems, proper billing plans, proper start dates. And this is different from in each of the 4 areas that I spoke about: network mobility, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. In general, the older billing systems, call it mobility and telecom, tend to have more errors across all of these areas. And of course, network has the additional problem of having physical challenges, simply having to actually dig trenches and put in cable and put in extensions, having to deal with physical challenges that don't exist for these other three challenges to the other three areas of mobility, SaaS, and infrastructure service to the same degree. However, it's been interesting to see that as infrastructure as a service and software as a service have gotten older, they are starting to have their own problems with things, some of the details that have typically not been as much of a challenge, such as billing plans, timing. Several months ago, Amazon Web Service had a challenge where it was actually billing over 1,000 hours a month for certain services, and people were finding this on the bills. So if you do the math, 30 days times 24 hours a day equals 720. So it's very hard to have 1,000 hours of service in a single month. Obviously, so this means as you look at your bills associated with the service orders, and you want to make sure that you are being billed for in a standard month, 30 days, 720 hours, of 43,000 minutes. You know, just getting that, checking those numbers and making sure that's right, 43,200 minutes. You can tell that I looked for this before. This is something that actually becomes a challenge, and we'll talk more about that on Thursday. But you know, these active services, these are the 5 areas that I think of as most important for following up on the service order. Second of all, you know, once you have a service order, to follow it to completion, you want to make sure that those actual services are billed. Service order is assigned to the right office, region, cost center, project, and stakeholder. So here are the areas that I think about for those service orders being translated to billed services. Making sure that the rate units and time associated with the billing plan that you've chosen are actually being used, whether that's in terms of kilobytes of data or minutes of usage, whatever that is, as well as that what you're being billed for matches what you believe you've signed up for. Moving to the right, looking at accurate service names, this can be surprisingly difficult as companies like to change the names of their services or the buckets that you are put into, or the rate plans that you're using, or the services, or the level of service that you have signed up for. Make sure that your service names that you're being billed for either match what you have originally signed up for, or that the names that they are changing to are in alignment with the level of service that you're used to getting. This is really one of these marketing problems that is endemic in the IT world. Everybody loves providing something new and different and better. And frankly, billing services and billing applications get messed up as marketing tries to move faster than they can update all of their systems. That leads to errors. Next, looking at the bottom row, service orders, make sure that as each service order is completed, that this leads to a service that is cross-charged and tagged accurately to get across your departments and your locations, your projects, your stakeholders, and make sure that each service is identified with all of those areas so that you can take the subsequent steps of cost management and inventory management without having to reinvent the wheel. It's much easier to do things right the first time than have to clean them up retroactively and try to figure out who ordered what based on shoddy documentation. Fifth thing is to look at the service order and then match up the start date with your bills, and as well as with actual activity that has taken place. This can often be a place where there's confusion of days or even weeks between when you think an order has gone through and when you're being billed, or you might get a surprise bill for services that were not provided, but that you're retroactively billed for. So make sure that your start date matches the actual completion of your service orders as you are starting to actually understand how your service orders have been enacted by your service provider. And then finally, look at the relevant taxes, surcharges, and discounts. We'll talk more about this on Thursday on the invoice and payment side, but it's important to know which service orders you've placed that are relevant to either the contract or tariff that you are responsible for following associated with the orders that you're placing. Then third of all, when you're looking at a service order, we talked about the A, we talked about the B, now we're talking about the C, of being compliant, ensuring that each service is governed, compliant, and secure. Each IT subscription service has its own set of governance, compliance, and security tools. So again, we're talking about network, enterprise mobility, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, things that are billed on a monthly basis and typically have some level of either usage or service level that is different from user to user and provides different amounts of change. And so I've listed some of the applications that I think about in terms of compliance for each of these services. Obviously, we can get much deeper into each one of these services, but for today, I just wanted to give you an idea of what I mean by compliance. Governance, compliance, and security end up being important, of course. And this also is a reason to be able to find some way of centralizing sourcing and orders, because if nothing else, all these people who want to order, especially SaaS and infrastructure as a service through Shadow IT, need to realize that if they're going to order things under an expense report or behind IT policies, that they are the ones responsible for handling these compliance issues at the end of the day. And frankly, I've never seen an IT manager or a developer or a regular employee wanting to order technology who also wanted to be an accountant and also wanted to manage security and also wanted to worry about the legal aspects on a local, state, regional, or national level. So this is an area that's important to enforce as well as to educate users on, that your employees, as they are looking at services, need to understand that if you place an order that you and don't do it within the system, you are now responsible for having a compliant service. And if it's not a compliant service, that this is an issue. And that this can be very complicated across all of the areas that we're looking at in an IT subscription service, across IT subscription services, which make up globally about $1.2 billion in spend across the world. So, key takeaway, service orders need to be driven to an active, build, and compliant end state. And as simple as that sounds, from an IT perspective, this means driving down into the technical aspects of what makes a service active, the financial and accounting aspects of what makes a service billable, as well as the security and legal aspects of what makes a service compliant. This is going to differ across each of your IT areas, and this is where you require some level of technical expertise to be involved within the service order placement as well as the fulfillment to make sure that things actually happen correctly. If service orders are being handled on an operational level by someone who is not fluent in IT, make sure that you at least have someone who is looking over the fulfillment and then the initial bills that does have technical experience so that they can actually speak to what has been provided, what hasn't, and whether your company may be eligible for discounts or refunds from your service orders, from your service provider based on the contracts that you have in place. So with that, thanks so much for joining me today. This was just going to be a quick intro into the service order world. We'll be speaking much more on this topic and many others at TEM Expo 2020 on July 14th. Please contact us at TEM Expo at Amalgam Insights or sign up for our event. You have a sign up link, again, as I mentioned below, in the attachment tab in your view. Please join us July 14th and join both our virtual event and the Slack channel that will be eligible for, that will be available for all eligible signees. So thanks a lot for joining us today and have a great day.